Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 5:30, and I can confirm the live stream and recording has begun. You may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. I see that we have quorum for this meeting under the Planning Act. I will now call it into session. And the first order of business is the land recognition statement read by Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and the friendship of Indigenous people.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I now turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have some opening remarks. Just allow me one moment. Public meeting under the Planning Act, Wednesday, December 13th at 5:30 p.m. The Town of Pelham is holding hybrid public meetings. This involves a mixture of in-person and remote attendance and participation. No decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. The Planning Department will also be providing a presentation regarding the subject application. Public meetings under the Planning Act require decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you've pre-registered to speak, you'll be given an opportunity to provide your comments to committee at the public portion. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note that all comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting. Inappropriate comments will not be tolerated, and if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner responsible for the application in writing as soon as possible, and contact information will follow on the presentation. Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to item number 3, being the adoption of the agenda, and I have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckert that the agenda for the December 13th, 2023 public meeting under the Planning Act, special meeting of Committee of the Whole, be adopted as circulated. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on the agenda? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not seeing any. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings you to the disclosure of pecuniary interests.
Thank you. After viewing the agenda, does any councillor have a disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item number 5, and I will now read the opening remarks. Town of Pelham application for zoning bylaw amendment, 61 Port Robinson Road, file AM-10-2023. A zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the property to a residential 2R2 zone with the specific provisions to permit the future residential development of a portion of the lands. The Planning Act requires under Section 34 that council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect to the proposed amendment. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this request. Notice of the meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on November 21st, 2023. The notice provided information on the properties and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk or planner in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is available on the town's website and will be displayed on the last slide of the staff presentation to follow. If a person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they do not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the town before the bylaw is passed, they are not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and therefore any comments received will be considered by council. To you, Mr. Mayor, we do have our planner, Andrew Edwards, here with us today.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, we'll have the floor.
Good evening. Tonight's public meeting concerns a proposed zoning bylaw amendment application at 61 Port Robinson Road. The property is located on the north side of Port Robinson Road, east of Station Street, outlined in red on the slide here. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment aims to rezone the lands from the residential development zone to a site-specific residential 2 zone. The requested zoning change requests a maximum front yard setback of 6.13 meters, whereas 6 meters is required. I note these are existing conditions. In addition, the application requests a minimum of 1 parking space for a single detached dwelling, whereas the requirement is 2 parking spaces. Surrounding land uses are primarily residential, consisting of a mix of single detached dwellings, semi-detached dwellings, and a small-scale apartment to the west. If you'd please refer to the concept plan on the slide here. The zoning change would facilitate the future severance of the lands for the construction of a semi-detached dwelling on the western portion of the site, which is Part 1 outlined in red. Part 2 currently contains a single detached dwelling, which is proposed to remain. Part 1 contains a detached garage that is proposed to be removed to facilitate the construction of the semi. The existing driveway is proposed to be relocated to provide access to the single detached dwelling, and this is outlined in yellow. A future application for consent to the Committee of Adjustment will be required in order to sever the parcel into 2 parts. In terms of the provincial plan and policies, the land use planning framework for the property includes being located within a designated settlement area per the provincial policy statement. In the provincial policy statement, settlement areas are intended to be the focus of growth and new development and include a mix of uses, housing options, and densities that efficiently use land and infrastructure. Similarly, the property is in a delineated built-up area in the growth plan. In the Niagara Region official plan, the property is within the urban built-up area. Similarly, this area is intended to be the focus of residential and employment intensification and redevelopment over the long term. The region's OP policies also encourage the provision of a variety of housing types within urban communities and neighborhoods to serve a variety of people as they age through their life cycle. In terms of the town's official plans, the lands are located within the East Fonthill Secondary Plan area of the town's official plan. The lands are designated medium density residential. Permitted uses in this designation are all forms of townhouse units, small scale apartments, singles, and semis, among other uses. Section B1.7 of the OP provides the policy base for the East Fonthill Secondary Plan area. Objectives of this plan include, but are not limited to, ensuring that the community is developed with a compact urban form, to establish a complete community, and to ensure that new development occurs on the basis of full urban water and sanitary sewer services. In terms of our zoning bylaw, the property is zoned residential development, RD, according to Schedule C of the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw. The intent of this zone is to act as a placeholder zone that requires the submission of a zoning bylaw amendment application to permit any future development. Permitted uses in the RD zone permit existing single detached dwellings and existing uses at the time of passing of the bylaw. Accordingly, the applicant is requesting to amend the zoning on the property to a site-specific residential 2 zone. Permitted uses in the R2 zone include single detached dwellings, duplexes, semi-detached dwellings, and accessory uses. The requested rezoning would facilitate the future development of a semi-detached dwelling on a portion of the lands, as well as continue to permit the existing single detached dwelling. There are 3 site-specific provisions required as part of the application. One is to recognize the existing front yard setback of the single detached dwelling. 2, to permit the proposed parking configuration for the single detached dwelling following removal of the existing garage and future severance of the lands. Through the review of the application, staff identified 1 additional site-specific provision that will be required to permit the development. The 3rd site-specific provision is to permit the chimney on the west side of the dwelling to encroach 0.52 meters into a side yard where it is permitted to encroach 0.5. Several comments have been received on the application from both external agencies and town departments, which are summarized on the slide here. Town planning indicated that they are not supportive of one parking space for the existing single detached dwelling, and that the location of the parking area in front of the existing dwelling is not consistent with the East Fonthill urban design guidelines. Public Works relayed comments with respects to the drainage strategy for the site and indicated a driveway and entrance permit would be required for the new driveway. Fire and bylaw had no comment. Enbridge indicated they had no objection. The Niagara region indicated no objection to the application, provided a letter of acknowledgement from the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism for the archaeological assessment be circulated to them prior to any construction activities commencing on site. And no public comments were received to date. The following materials were submitted along with the application. The applicant submitted a planning justification report, which provided a planning rationale for the application. They also provided a functional servicing brief that provided the servicing strategy for the units, along with a site servicing and grading plan. In addition, a stage 1 to 2 archaeological assessment was prepared for the lands. Thank you for your attention this evening. No decisions or recommendations concerning this application will occur tonight. Staff will review the comments received and prepare a recommendation for council's consideration at a later date. If any member of the public wishes to receive notices regarding this application, please ensure that you've provided your written comments, verbal comments tonight, or provide your contact information to the clerk or myself as soon as possible. With that concludes my presentation, and planning staff are happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. To the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have the applicant's agent with us, Mr. Craig Rowe of Upper Canada Consultants, and Mr. Rowe does have a presentation for council.
Thank you. Mr. Rowe, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I must say it's nice to be back in the chambers finally. I think the last time I was here was 2019, so it's nice to see we got a couple extra feet behind me too, which is nice. It's my intention this evening just to provide a bit more of a detailed overview of what the application entails. Andrew did a great job of kind of talking about the policy context and everything, so I'll try to focus my comments a little bit more on what's at hand and why we're asking for some of the provisions that we are. So in terms of the subject lands, if you've been by them or been to them, they're on the north side of Port Robinson Road. The large parcel of land that you see in the background is a future phase of subdivision development that will be coming as part of the East Fonthill secondary plan. South of the lands, there's also draft approved plans of subdivision. I believe that one might be Forest Park. Kunda Park, I always mix them both up. And then we've seen a lot of revitalization, redevelopment going on along Port Robinson Road with a mix of the townhomes, semi-detached, and new single-detached dwellings. So our clients, their plan for development of the property includes this first step, which is a severance of the western portion of the property. And the intent of that is to build a semi-detached dwelling. And it's also their intent later on that with the remnant parcel that currently has a single detached, that would also be redeveloped. So that'll be important as it factors into some of the provisions that we're asking for. Here's a picture of the dwelling in more fair weather, just to kind of give you a set of the context there. So generally what we're looking at in terms of the severance of the property would be the house over to about the edge of the driveway plus a little bit. That's effectively where that severance line would be, and that detached garage would be removed. This is the view of this in plan. So where you can see on our drawing here, so the semi-detached dwelling proposed. With the lot that's being created for the semi-detached, it actually meets all the requirements of the R2 zone asking for. It's able to provide the 2 parking spaces that are there, and also once it's severed down the middle into 2 conveyable units, those parcels will also meet the zoning. The site-specific zoning that we're asking for would only apply to the single detached dwelling. Through the new adoption of the town's new zoning bylaw, there's a maximum front yard setback, whereas this existing detached building encroaches just a little bit past there, about a half a foot or so, or sorry, foot and a half. One thing I just wanted to draw to your attention, and I'll touch on this in a minute, is the location of these utility poles that are just located down here, right kind of between the driveway of the property to the east and the subject lands. So with regards to the type of semi-detached dwelling that's going to be built, our clients here, Laura and Mark behind me, they've done a similar build in Welland. So this is the rendering from the architect of what the dwelling would look like. And this is a constructed photograph of what was constructed in Welland. So this is in the east portion, down in the McCabe Avenue area. Andrew did a great job of summarizing the planning framework, but essentially the East Fawn Hill Secondary Plan permits single detached dwellings and semi-detached dwellings. So we have conformity there from the official plan standpoint. However, with the zoning of the property, as was shown on the map, it's zoned as residential development, which does serve as a placeholder. So that allows the council to have an opportunity to review any development applications for the property, ensure that the zoning is appropriate and compatible with the neighborhood. So here you can see that gap in gray. That's the residential development zone that requires an amendment to change. In terms of our proposed development, we're going for an R2 zone, and this will cover the entirety of the property. The site-specific provisions, as I mentioned, only pertain to the retained single detached dwelling. And that's for the increased maximum front yard setback from 6.0 meters to go to 6.2. Of note is the minimum of one parking space. So when we filed this application, we're looking to provide one parking space as a bit of a stopgap measure so we could develop the first property. Our clients are going to live in the existing dwelling, then they would tear it down and move forward with a new development where we could more appropriately locate a driveway and an attached garage and have that parking provided. We can appreciate staff's position on this. So this morning we provided a diagram showing a double wide driveway on the left side of the property. So if I can I'll just kick back here to our severance sketch. A double wide driveway, which would be generally located in this area. When it comes to the Fawn Hill Urban Design Guidelines, the requirement of those guidelines is that parking is preferred in this area to be provided along the side of the dwelling. And as I alluded to before, we do have 2 utility poles that are basically right where we would want to put that driveway. And we do have room down that side of the house. So in order to accommodate that driveway, we'd have to get the utility poles relocated, which can be a very costly endeavor. Our client Mark has actually reached out to the Hydro Authority and is having a meeting on site this week. So we'll get a little bit more information to see if that is cost effective or if it's really just we can't do it. But we're hoping that although it's maybe not in direct alignment with the East Fawn Hill Urban Design Guidelines, providing a double driveway does provide the necessary amount of parking on site in that temporary configuration. And with regards to the chimney encroachment, as you saw, it's a difference of 0.02 meters. So we think that's relatively minor, and that was done. We'll take that encroachment there to ensure that the new lot is able to conform fully with the R2 zoning that we're asking for. So in terms of our next steps with this project, it would be reviewing any public or agency comments that we have. We have our agency comments. Nothing submitted from the public just yet. And any questions that council may have for us this evening. We'll make any revisions and updates to that application as required, and we expect it to come back in January just based on the timing of the filing of the application. Following this, we would then move into the severance of the lands to create the new lot and then complete the registration, and then we can move forward hopefully with construction of a new home starting sometime this spring, summer. So those are my remarks. I'll leave this up on the screen for the aid of discussion. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent. Thank you for your presentation. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the public portion of the meeting, and we do not have any pre-registered speakers this afternoon, and we have not received any emails at this time. Therefore, it is 5:50 p.m., and if you'd like to move to committee portion, you may.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move to the members of committee. Questions or comments to the applicant or to the town planning department. Councilor Nesnick. Oh, okay.
Hi, yes, thank you very much for your presentations, both to Andrew and yourself. So you were going very quickly, so just to confirm what your plan is for the current residents, you're taking down the garage, which I understand, and then at the front of the house, whether you originally had one single car, you're now going to widen out that driveway and have a double car driveway in that area that's right, yeah, where you're highlighting right now. Oh, that would be perfect. So that's the proposed one, and then you're going to widen that out and make it a double size?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. It would be double wide, meeting the town standards, but the point of contention is the fact that it's not down along the side of the dwelling. It would be in the front yard.
Okay, and then just maybe a comment with regards to our planner on that. What's their thinking on that?
Andrew? What's the town's planning department's position on this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that our opinion is really based on the conformity with the urban design guidelines, which really encourage parking areas to be located, as mentioned, to the side or to the rear of buildings, really to encourage a inviting streetscape as viewed from pedestrian standpoint. So that's really our comments with respect to locating the parking to the rear.
So,
Counselor?
okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, so just to clarify then that the town would not support the widening or doubling of the front driveway, because we definitely don't want it just to stay single, because as you know, that stretch of road has really gotten redeveloped and is quite busy as it is, and, you know, to have cars parking along that street would not be favorable, I don't believe. So is that what I'm understanding, that you would not be in favor of the double wide driveway?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're working with the applicant to come to more of a mutual understanding of where parking would be appropriate on the site. Through the review of the new drawing that he submitted, we would work towards providing our recommendation.
Counselor?
Okay, thank you very much. Just one more question. Thank you very much. So just with regards to setbacks, I know the new urban design is to have them up front and close to the roads. However, since the home is currently set back, and you do have enough depth there to back up the townhouse that's planned, is it possible to have that set back a little bit deeper, and then that would give the driveway space on the townhouse side more area for parking? So that's, I guess, a question to the town developer.
Okay, I'll go back to you, Andrew. Any comments on the comments of the counselor?
Through the mayor, sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question there. Could you?
Sure, so the minimum setback, I guess, is for the townhouses, you have, they've been drawn as they are. But given the depth of the property, and to get them back off the road a little bit more, which is, I know, not urban design, but it is my preferential design, is that a possibility? I saw Ms. Weens with her hand up. Maybe she can help assist me on that.
Ms. Weens?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, there is a bit of flexibility in terms of that. The houses are supposed to be 3 and 6 meters setback from the street edge. So there is a bit of flexibility to push the semi-detached dwelling a little further back. It's not going to be setting it back, 8 meters from the street or anything like that, but there is a bit of flexibility.
To the council.
Yes, so thank you. So that would be from the front part of the building, not the setback for the garage, right?
Correct. It's the front face of the building. And the garage needs to be set back at least 6 meters in order to be able to accommodate a parking spot in the driveway.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, if you could maybe manipulate that back as much as you could, that would be favorable. And I'm glad to hear that you are willing to work with the applicant with regards to the parking on the other piece of property. Ideally, yes, if those hydro poles can get moved and you can move the parking there, that I assume that would be your intent. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, if it was cost effective to do that, that would certainly be an option for us. Unfortunately, they're just in the way right now.
Sure, yeah, fair enough. Okay, yep, thank you very much then. I'm sure you'll be able to come up with some sort of compromise there that'll work for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll go to this side. I saw Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Mr. Rowe, with regards to being cost effective, that has different meanings for different people. I know that in my area, a person had the same problem, and you're at the boundary line, I think, of NPEI and Hydro One, so there's significant cost difference. But I know the person on Hay Street that had a pole moved, and it was $40,000. So I don't know whether you consider that a cost-appropriate move of taking care of the pole? That's just a question I have for you, you know,
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, it tends to vary by hydro authority, it appears. So certainly anything that would be a reasonable cost, and that will of course come down to the budgeting of our client on this. You're right, is it MPEI who you're meeting with? Yes, so it's MPEI territory on this one. I know they can be a little bit easier to work with when it comes to hydro matters, but
their costs are significantly less.
yes.
Plus their office is in Niagara Falls, and you can actually talk to somebody.
Yes, they do exist. Yes, certainly we'll put our best foot forward with that. And if we can find a reasonable way to do this, we'll endeavor to do that. Yes.
Yeah. And Counselor? That's it? Thank you. Go to this side. Counselor Eckert?
Yes, thank you. My concerns are along the same lines as Councillor Niznik. First of all, about parking. And I know maybe it's jumping the gun a little bit for the proposed semi-detached dwellings, but the last thing I want to see is, I mean, there's very few people out there that don't have 2 vehicles in the family, and maybe more. And the last thing I want to see is cars dumped on the roadway for long periods of time. It interferes with traffic, with snow plowing, and et cetera. So that's a concern, and I'm glad to see that you're working with planning. Second part of this is brought up by Public Works, and it's about drainage. So is there discussions ongoing between us and you about their concerns on the draining and the underground infrastructure?
Yes, thank you very much for the question through Mr. Mayor. One of the things that we did submit with our application was a preliminary grading and servicing plan. So currently the way that the flows come through, they come through the property to the west and then drain. I got this annotate tool, so I might as well use it. The drainage pattern kind of goes like this through the backyard. So as part of our strategy, we're going to be grabbing the water course or the ditch here and then routing it through a catch basin and then a formal culvert, which would go across these properties and then connect into the existing ditch that's located behind this property. So the ultimate plan behind this is this drainage is really generated from the area out on Station Street. It's my understanding, talking with our engineer, we found that one of those drain pipes was actually under a building, so it had to be abandoned, and it was kind of rerouted here over land. So our approach would be to put this infrastructure in the ground across the back of both properties, connecting the 2 properties that are on either side. And eventually these flows, the ones that aren't infiltrated into the ground, would be captured and put into the storm sewer system that's going to be constructed as part of the overall subdivision located to the northeast. So we have submitted that plan. This cost would be our cost. The works would be the responsibility of the individual landowners to keep that clean and free to make sure that it flows appropriately.
Counselor?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Kerr?
Thank you for your presentation. I look at it and I guess my brain goes along and understand intensification and the opportunity to have a single family dwelling, live in it, develop a parcel. Everybody looks at the economic resources part of it. Personally, looking at having a driveway, double width driveway going into a single family dwelling is to me, considering it would be, I would probably classify it as temporary. If you really look at it, the long-term planning, this is something where that single family dwelling is likely to be demolished and reestablished as another semi. So in fact, its location is probably going to change within a period of time. So I kind of lean towards, if I've got to spend all the money to move hydro poles, that in 6 years' time they weren't going to be in the way. Seems almost like a little bit of redundant work being done in advance of something that wouldn't be a problem in the future based on the location of where the driveways for a semi would be located on that part 2. So I understand the issues relative to planning and the Fonthill design. This is, to me, a short-term situation versus a long-term situation. So I don't have difficulty with a double-width driveway there. I mean, ideally, you'd like to have a garage, and ideally, you'd like to put it beside the house. But if it's a matter of creating a lot of extra effort that isn't, I guess, to me, if something's going to be changed in 5 or 8 years, it seems like a lot of effort for something in advance of that. So I support the fact that you're dealing with the planning and everything else, but I don't have a difficulty with ensuring there's at least 2 parking spaces off the road at that single-family dwelling part 2.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor questions or comments to the presentations? And I see Councillor Wink. You on mute, sir?
Sorry about that. Not used to Zoom anymore. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Craig. Thanks for your presentation. You had mentioned that the single-family dwelling on Part 2 will eventually be brought down and probably another form of dwelling put in there. What type of assurances do we have as a town that that's in fact actually going to happen, and what is the time frame that you're thinking of that that's going to happen? Because we could go ahead, pass all this, and then have it sit there for 20 years with a single family or a single with parking spot or even a double in front of the house. So what type of assurances do we have that you're going to be moving forward on Part 2?
Craig?
Thank you for the question, Councillor, and through Mr. Mayor. At this time, it's the intention of our client. Of course, we know how volatile the market is, so it is a reasonable question. And I would say that that's something that I can discuss a little bit further with my clients, and perhaps we can find a method to deal with this with staff, whether through the approval or somewhat. But of course, if it is their intention to do something, but the market happens to take a turn and it becomes not possible, I can appreciate that comment that it might not be a circumstance that you would support.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go back to Councillor Kerr.
Yes, in looking at the drawing, I guess being concerned about 2 parking spots in front of the existing dwelling, the depth of those 2 parking spots is identical to the depth of the 2 parking spots for the semi-detached. So you still have a vehicle parked functionally in front of your house. And I think we're all aware throughout this entire town that there's a large number of vehicles that are parked on driveways, some with 3 or 4 cars parked out there. So I guess I'm coming back to the safety side of having 2 parking spots to reduce the potential that single family would have to park on the street. And the secondary side is that I don't think aesthetically at this point, relative to everything that's being built around it, it's going to be dramatically different.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Not seeing any. I'll turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the presentation of resolutions. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that committee receive report 2023-0251 for information as it pertains to file number AM-10-2023, and that committee direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report for council on this topic. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And one last time, any other questions or comments on the presentation tonight? Not seeing any. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? I see none opposed. The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink that committee receive the applicant's presentation for information to you.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Not seeing any opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to adjournment, and I have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckert that the special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned. To you, Mr.
Thank you. All those in favor? See none opposed. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.